huge hello and welcome to another live stream, and so many people here already, which is absolutely just fantastic and brilliant. So thanks for joining me here. If my voice sounds a little bit croaky, sorry, I just realized I've got my sound on, so I'll switch the sound off. If my voice sounds a little bit croaky, that is the hangover from a cold I had last week, which luckily seems to have cleared up. If those of you who joined me last week, if you remembered, I said I was coming down with a bit of a cold, so that's cleared up. So thanks for joining me. A couple of housekeeping things as usual. If you are watching this live, thanks for watching live, and you wanted to leave a question, write the word question, ideally beforehand, because it makes it so much easier to see it within amongst the chat, so don't miss anybody. If you're watching this afterwards, because a lot of people sometimes say they don't like this video, it's a playback of a live stream, so I know many people do watch that as well, so thanks for doing that. What else can I do housekeeping wise? So I will not be doing a live stream next week because I'm actually heading up to Manchester with some friends. Those of you who are big UK soap fans will know of Coronation Street, which is, I think, the biggest soap in the UK. It's been going for something like 60 years or something bizarre. You can go and tour on the weekend when they're not filming the back lot and stuff like that. So we're doing that with some friends who are big fans of Coronation Street. I'm not a big fan of Coronation Street, but I love going to those tours. I've actually been to the old set before they scrapped that old set. And Mark and I have actually been to this new set, but it was when it had just reopened. So what they did is one of those storylines where there was a big accident. So that explained why when they rebuilt it looked different. Anyway, you're not here to learn about Coronation Street. Let's get diving in. There's lots of regulars here, which is great. So I'll mention you as we go. So Randy popped a question just before the live stream. So Randy, Mark and I got a chance to meet Randy and his lovely wife on Grandeur. So that was great. And Randy's asking the question, because I know Randy and his wife are big fans of Cunard. How would you compare the ship and the overall cruise experience between the Queen Anne, which of course hopefully everyone knows is the latest Cunard ship, and the Grandeur? I'm always interested in your opinions and thoughts. So Randy, because I saw this, I was trying to think about the best way of doing this. In reality, it is extremely different on so many levels. And I mean, I know you're quite familiar with the Cunard experience and obviously now with the Grandeur experience. Obviously, the ship is probably 3 or 4 times larger, Queen Anne, because there's 750 passengers on Grandeur, if I remember correctly, and Queen Anne is the biggest in terms of passenger numbers. I think it's close to about 3,000, if I remember correctly. So obviously it's way, way bigger. You obviously have the huge diversity of cabins, from inside cabins through to the the big suites. You have the different Britannia Club, Princess and Queen's Grill. So obviously from that perspective, it's very different. The shows are bigger. There's more choice of venues and stuff. There's a bit more. In fact, specialty dining is actually better on Grandeur. They have 2 big specialty dining venues on Queen Anne, and they use different themed ones, which they rotate in the King's Court or the Lido, whatever it's called these days. Obviously, Grandeur, as you know, is way more informal. Queen Anne and Cunard obviously still have the much more formal nights where people kind of dress up. Interesting as an aside, Cunard are dropping what I thought was always very popular, the themed nights, have black and white masquerade ball. They're dropping those completely and just having their formal night or gala night or whatever they call it. So I know some diehard Cunards are a bit disappointed with that. So obviously I think the Grandeur is way plusher from a decor perspective. Queen Anne is quite contemporary decor, not the usual Cunard decor. But the overall cruise experience is probably quieter, a little bit more sophisticated in reality on the Grandeur. I think one of the key differences, and I'm actually talk about this in the video that I've just finished writing the script for and recorded the script for, where I talk about Grandeur, is for me though the gold standard in dining experience is Queen's Grill on the Cunard ships, because you have your own table, which of course is still open seated dining. You have up to 3 waiters serving you, and it's all very silver service. So if you're getting vegetables, those are served separately, not everything comes plated. Whereas, as you know, in Grandeur, the main dining room, Compass Rose, is very similar to almost, I think, any sort of main dining room. It's a little bit manic. You don't get your own table, people are rushing around, and you don't get that kind of silver service. So it is a different experience. I mean, it's more of a premium experience than a luxurious experience. Hopefully I have answered that. If not, post some more kind of specifics on that one there. So Moonman 547 is here, which is great because I know that you're apart, and it was great that your other half had spent time with you. Heidi asks a question. Hi there, Gary. We'll be in Buenos Aires in January 26th before a cruise. What do you recommend we see on the tour, and what tour companies do you recommend us to use? So Heidi, one of the things that Buenos Aires obviously is a fabulous, fabulous city. I love Buenos Aires, and I'm very excited because only next year we're heading to Buenos Aires. Mark hasn't been to Buenos Aires, and he's coming with on that trip. We're going to spend some time there. Heidi, one of the things that I would actually suggest you look at, which is what I did with it, is do the hop-on, hop-off bus, because there's two big providers there. There's a classic one, which was at City Sightseeing, and there's another one which is the yellow one. I can't remember the name of that one. And you can buy 24 or 48 hour circuits on those, and they do take you to all the critical places and go nearby the places. So I actually used that hop-on, hop-off bus, and I used the guide from that to decide where I was going to get off. So obviously getting off at the magnificent graveyard, where just the whole place is pretty spectacular. And of course, you can go and see, which many people want to go and see, the grave of Eva Peron, and then different markets and stuff. So actually, I didn't use any tour companies. I literally did the hop-on-off bus. So I went to see the beautiful opera house and stuff like that. I had a 48 hour, because we had an overnight in Buenos Aires when I was in Holland, America, before we disembarked. And so I got a 48-hour pass and basically self-explored. So I don't have any specific tour companies that I can recommend, but if anyone does have any, please will you pop that in there? That would be great. So Mike Carey asked a question, looking at your calendar for 2025, I noticed you have a few months where you're not cruising. Are you hoping for some last minute deals this year? So for those who don't know, I do on my website, tipsfortravelers.com. I have a little section there, which I think is called Future Cruises or something like that. And I do list the cruises that I've booked. But you're right, I do have a couple of gaps, but in reality, that's largely because I'm going to be doing some land-based stuff, which is why those gaps are there. So I'm also doing slightly longer cruises this year. So I'm just looking at bringing up 2025. So I have some gaps in June, but I'm actually going to a good friend of ours. It's her 60th, and she's hired a villa for our group of people coming from Australia and stuff. So we're going there. In September into October, we're going to Las Vegas and Palm Springs for a period of time. So those kind of what look like empty months are not really that empty. March is probably the one that I do have some time to actually do something. So in reality, it's filled in by land-based trips. And as I mentioned, a lot of those cruises I'm doing are longer. So I'm doing an 18-night in August. I'm doing what ends up being a month long, all of November, which is the Africa and Cape Town. And then we're doing like almost nearly 4-week one in December. So it's also just spending some time at home. So in terms of last minute deals, I am not at all optimistic on last minute deals. I did the video recently looking at the scope for last minute deals, and they are not looking great, because if you look at in fact, I've got a video coming out next week, which is looking at ahead of 2025, where I also look at this. I've been looking through all of the reports that the major cruise lines have given to the Wall Street, and it's incredible. Like the Carnival Corporation Group CEO, Josh Weinstein, says that they have sold across their brands almost 3/4 of all berths available in 2025 heading into the year. So, I think last minute deals are going to be more unlikely. I am though seeing sort of flash sales, but it tends to be more with the premium, the luxury lines. They're doing a little bit more of those. So it's sort of a complicated way of saying it's not the reason the gaps are because I'm doing some land-based stuff rather than waiting for deals. In fact, I'm trying to plan out my 26. You've probably seen that I've got up until June 2026. I want to plan the second half of 2026, but I'm holding back slightly based on what Mark plans are, so I can fill those in. But I keep encouraging to make up his mind so I can lock that down. Tony asked the question, on your Antarctica trips, have you taken hiking poles, or do you think that they're not needed or indeed supplied by the cruise line? So Tony, I haven't taken hiking poles, and I actually have never used hiking poles. However, it is, I would say it is pretty strongly recommended, because particularly at the time of year you're going, with the snow and the ice, many people would use those hiking poles. Now, a lot of it depends on which line you're going with. So for example, on Silversea, you could hire ahead of time hiking poles. Of course, we'll bring your own, but actually once you're on the ship, they'd had a big box of a big tub, if that's the right word, full of hiking poles, which you could either get as you got off the ship onto the Zodiacs, and they would also have them landside, so you could use them there. So I would encourage you to probably take them. It's probably my I should probably be using them way more. So I would way more. So I would encourage you to take hiking pulses. I mean, the worst case is you're not going to use them very much, but certainly because we were at the beginning of the season, and it did get kind of icy and did be fairly snowy, a lot of people felt that was a massive plus. Hetty is here heading off on Fort Lauderdale for 133 night on the Volendam. Fantastic, Hetty. Have a fabulous time, and hopefully we will keep up to date with you, which I look forward to with your little updates and things, which will be great. Mark asked a question. I've just booked the Queen Mary 2 San Francisco to Sydney. That's a great itinerary. I've done that itinerary not on Queen Mary 2, on Queen Victoria. Suffer from seasickness. In your opinion, what is the best remedy if needed? So Mark, I will tell you what I haven't used them, but I will tell you what most people recommend. And also when I was on in one of my Antarctica trips, what the doctor was telling me he was recommending, both to prescribing to both the crew and passengers who were suffering, which is the behind the ear patches. So you get those on prescription. Is it Phenergan, or I think or is it something with S ingredient? But you do get those on prescription. But the behind the ear one is the one that certainly the doctor was using, and all the Ponant crew who were suffering and passengers is what he was prescribing. So that apparently is one of the most powerful ones of all. Now, I, touch wood, I'm fortunate that I don't suffer from seasickness, but what I do use, which I like, and I don't know whether you're based in the US or the UK, Mark, but Dramamine works for me very well, so I always use it as kind of insurance. If you're in the UK, I used to use Sturgeon. I always get it slightly wrong because I normally say the name of the fish instead of, but it's Sturgeon. So those are the ones that work. Now, when I was first time I went to Antarctica, and I thought I might need something more serious, I actually spoke to my doctor and got a prescription, which I think was for Phenergan pills. And I think Phenergan is also the active that doctors will use if you can't hold anything down. So, for example, on Cunard ships, if you are really suffering and you can't hold anything down, you can talk to the medical center, and they do have an injectable option, which I think, but don't quote me on this, please, I think it's the Phenergan thing. So certainly Mark, who suffers from seasickness, has done that twice when we've been on winter crossings, and they really worked well. But I think, what I generally find, Mark, so those are the kind of the remedy side. Obviously, there's things like watching the horizon and eating ginger and other of those kinds of things. But I'm guessing you're asking for something a little bit more heavy duty. So hopefully that helps. Let's have a look. So Jeff is here, which is great. Good to see you, Jeff. Heike. So Heike is asking the question. So Heike has been on many other group cruises, which is fantastic. During our Greek islands cruise, we will stop at Kusadasi. Do I need to have a visa for Turkey, which I usually need as a US citizen? So I just want to be big warning. The thing is, I always double check this, but I did have a quick Google. I looked at what I always do, Heike, is I always look for because I'm UK, I have UK passport. I always look at the Foreign Office site. So I look at the Foreign Office site, so FCO Turkey, and that will tell me all the entry requirements that I need, and they are very up to date and very accurate. The State Department has a similar thing. So, for example, I actually just Googled before I came on because I thought I knew the answers, but I just Googled State Department Turkey entry requirements, and there it said that because I brought it up here. There it said you've currently got level 2, exercise increased caution. You need a 6-month beyond date of entry passport, 1 page for entry and stamps, and a tourist visa not required for stays under 90 days. But of course, please do double check that. But definitely, I would say that State Department site, because you're a US passport holder, is the place to go. I find those really good. And obviously, if in Australia, there's equivalent. Canada, there's equivalent, and so on. But that's really what I use. So for example, heading off to China, that's where I checked it. I actually went and got a visa for China because there is what travel agent Sarah sent me, which was that what they do in China now, because I was had a visa before, is if you're going on a cruise line excursion, the cruise line can get kind of an exemption. But I'd just much rather have that visa, which is why I understand your kind of caution there. So lots of people here. Katie, Chris, Warren is here, which is great. Lots of people in California. I thought I did see a quick thing popping up there. Mark and Nanette, I think are waiting to board your fabulous adventure which is quite a long adventure off on Silversea, which I'm very envious about. So thanks for popping in and saying hello. Have a great, happy embarkation and fabulous trip. So let's have a look. I got slightly sidetracked there, didn't I? Let's have a look. Reminder, just write the word question so I don't miss your question. So Frederick, I didn't miss yours. What's your opinion of Crystal Cruise Lines? So I will be able to tell you in greater detail in a very soon, because in 3 weeks today, I will be flying off. And I'll bring this up because I actually had this here to bring up. So you've actually given me a nice thing because I forgot to bring it up. So it's slightly, oh, sorry, Frederick, it's slightly overlooking. Let me take your comment off. Whoops. So I'm actually heading off on Crystal Symphony. Now I have been on Crystal Serenity pre-shutdown and pre them going bankrupt. I'm going on Symphony. Really excited to find out what they're like. Certainly all the reviews are extremely positive that I've been following, and friends of mine who've been on Crystal have raved about it, and some who've been on Crystal pre it going bust and becoming part of Abercrombie and Kent, and those who've never been on before. So they raved about it. So 3 weeks today, I'm flying to Japan. I've got 4 or 5 days in Japan, and on the 14th, I'm boarding this trip, which goes Yokohama to Nagasaki, Busan, and Jeju in South Korea. Overnight in Shanghai, a full day in Shanghai. There was some slight changes there. So we're going to Kirimoa and then to Manila. Then once I get to Manila, after 11 nights, I'm going to Hong Kong for a couple of days because I've been to Hong Kong for a long time and I love Hong Kong. So I will be able to tell you in huge amounts of detail much more about Crystal. But certainly the reviews and friends of mine have really loved it. So I'm really exciting to see how that goes. Fraser C is here, which is great. Fraser joining us from MSC Preziosa. For those of you who don't know Fraser, he has a YouTube channel. Spent most of last year pretty much almost back-to-back cruising, and is now dipping out of cruising, but he's done quite a lot of MSC and he's on Preziosa, which I'm very keen to follow. Preziosa was an MSC ship that I went to the naming ceremony and actually went on the maiden voyage of. So, and it's because it's not as big as the Manic ships, I'm sure it's quite good. I've been following your stuff so far. Aegis Curiosity, hi, good to see you here. Happy New Year. We're looking to go on a cruise with Regent sometime this year. Which of their ships would you recommend, Alison and Ian? So Aegis Curiosity is someone else to follow across all the different channels and social media, etc. So I would say now, of their ships, so they currently have 6 in service, 1 coming in 2026, which is a new class of ship. So I would tend to focus on, Navigator is a ship that I do like. I've been on Navigator to the Caribbean. In fact, for our Africa trip, we're doing a Navigator. It's a very old ship, about 450 passengers. But of their other ships, I would try and focus on, we've just been on Grandeur, which is their newest ship, which is absolutely beautiful. The layouts of the ships are kind of similar, but if you can go on Grandeur, I would go on Grandeur because it's the newest ship. It's the most glitzy. It's a beautiful ship. A little bit tweaks here and here that they're done. I've been on Explorer, which is one of the older ships, which I also really liked. But a lot of people do like Splendor, for example. So I would tend to stay away from Navigator because that is not a typical Regent ship. It's a very different layout, completely different layout. It's a much older ship, very different experience, not as modern and stuff like that. Has a bit more vibration than the other ships. But if you can go on Grandeur, I would go on Grandeur. Regent is fantastic. Now I have a video, I think if you were here earlier, I've written the script, I've recorded, it needs to be edited. So that will probably come out in maybe 3 weeks' time within all the scheduling stuff. So that hopefully will also give you kind of more insights into Regent. So let's have a look. Just a reminder, write the word questions. A couple so Dave asked the question, getting ready to leave on my Norwegian cruise line trip to Spain, France, and Portugal. Gratuities are said to be included. Is it true cabin stewards, waiters aren't getting the fair share? So there's the ongoing thing around gratuities, and it's a little bit of a black box because there's lots of stories and rumors and all sorts of going around. But basically, what happens with the cruise lines, crudely speaking, is crew are particularly on ships where you have gratuities are included, or I'm guessing you might have free at sea or something like that, or where they're auto added, is when crews sign up for a cruise, generally speaking, what will happen is they'll be given a guaranteed fare. which is made up by what the cruise line's paying them, and then it will have an amount which in reality gratuities make up. So the gratuities aren't actually on top of their salary. I mean, it is theoretically because it's on top of what the cruise line's paying them, but they do have a formula which spreads those out. Now, there is lots of worries that Norwegian takes a cut from that. There's no evidence to show that, lots of speculation, but certainly I've never seen anything that confirms that. So certainly they should get what they're expected to get. Now, obviously, if you have an incredible cabin steward, you may want to tip above that as well. So they generally do kind of acknowledge if they go above and beyond, because in reality, gratuities are now part of their salary that they're included, kind of broadly speaking. Tom asking, is it on your Facebook today? Yes, it should be on Facebook. And I normally do go live. I set it up to go live on Facebook and on LinkedIn. So if you're ever on there, it should be. But actually, no, that's a good point. I haven't seen any questions coming in from Facebook, but I did set it up to do that. Thanks for the tips for Sydney. We have Opera House Backstage Tour. Oh, fabulous. So last week, Thomas asked us some questions for Sydney, and we strongly recommend the Back House Stage Tour. I mean, it's crazy expensive, but it is fantastic. So in terms of tips for Adelaide, I have not spent a huge amount of time in Adelaide, but one of the things I would say is if you're obviously a wine fan, there are quite a few vineyards within sort of easy commuting distance of Adelaide, and there's lots of tours that will go out to Adelaide, from Adelaide, that you can sign up for. But definitely, absolutely make sure you go to the market. The market in Adelaide is phenomenal. And actually, if you look at my video that I did of the Indian Pacific, you'll actually see quite a long section on the market there. So that's all I've done really in Adelaide is I've literally been through Adelaide once when we were on the GAN. I've only ever been there before. The next time I went through was when we were going through on the Indian Pacific. But definitely most of the tours that were done were for the vineyards. So that's one of the key things to do. Hopefully that helps. If anyone has better tips on Adelaide, which I'm sure you will have, please pop those in as well. Katie, I'm interested in cruising in Ireland. Which line do you recommend best and experience for Ireland and Scotland? So Katie, a lot of this, of course, will hinge on what it is that you want as a cruise experience. So the good news is there are quite a few cruise lines that will cover parts of Ireland and Scotland. So it then heavily depends on the shipboard experience that you want, and then also obviously budget side. So what you generally find, speaking, is a lot of the cruises that go to Ireland are sort of what they call round UK trips, which I know annoy people in Ireland because it's not really around the UK, because it calls in Dublin and Cove, I'm always pronouncing it correctly, COBH, which of course are not part of the UK. It's part of Ireland. It's not part of Northern Ireland. Anyway, so a lot of there's a lot of those that do that. So a lot of it depends on kind of what you want to do. So what I would say, I'll give you a couple of suggestions, is Princess base ships in the UK during the summer season, and they have some very good round the UK tours which call into Ireland. Now they tend to only call into Dublin and Cove, I hope I pronounced it correctly, COBH, which is an important stop which Titanic stopped on, a very beautiful place. They often will call into Belfast as well. And then they may, depending on the itinerary, they may go round and cover more of the UK. So they'll cover a bit of Scotland. In reality, but they'll tend to go in Scotland, because they're bigger ships, they will tend to go to sort of the Edinburgh side, or the kind of the other side. So if you want to go into some of the smaller places, what I would recommend you look at is look at a line like Windstar. So I did a very nice trip on Windstar, Star Pride, I think it was, a couple of years ago, which sails out of Edinburgh, and literally because it was a small ship, it sailed literally out of Edinburgh. So it sailed right out there near where the Royal Britannia is in Leith. So that's a great thing about going small. You're also literally out of Edinburgh. Well, I guess Leith is a suburb out of, anyway, it's part of Greater Edinburgh, let's say. I'm sure people in Leith will be upset with me saying that. But anyway, so you sail there, and we went round up through Scotland. We called into lots of small places. So if you've ever watched, Scottish history, like Fort William, or if you ever watched the TV show, I've forgotten the name of it now, Outlander. which covers a lot of the history around there and woven into there. We called lots of places, smaller places, out of way places where we were basically tendering in, no big ship could go there. And then we went across to Ireland. Now the Ireland side was a little bit weaker, but we did go to Belfast, we did go to Dublin, but I actually disembarked there and it was going to do more of an itinerary. So the advantage if you wanted to see more of Scotland is to do that, because it will go to some of those smaller ports. Then of course, Cunard will do some, P&O do some and stuff, but I would look at that. I know Viking do quite an interesting itinerary as well. Again, that's pretty pricey, and Oceania do some as well. So those are the ones that would think. But if you really want to dive into small places, look at some of those smaller ships. Now Nicole has, I think, asked half a question. So we're looking forward to going to Antarctica next month. Fantastic on Silversea. Appreciate all your insights. We are considering, and you left us with a cliffhanger. So if you have something else, then have a look. Poker Boys think Compass Rose is the best main dining room at sea, so we'll agree to disagree. I mean, we loved Compass Rose. We really, really liked Compass Rose a lot. And to your point, we actually ate there most nights, and we actually preferred eating there. We actually pulled out of some of our special dining because we really liked Compass Rose. It's just that it was just so manic versus if you look at the kind of a Queen's Grill experience. But I mean, you're right. The food is great. I'm not sure they're better than some of the others, but I still think that, I mean, we really like Compass Rose, so we're sort of agreeing and disagreeing at the same time, if that makes sense. Let's have a look. John asking the question, and hopefully you're back from, so Poker Boys I was following, they were on, I'm trying to think, were you on Explorer? I was following you recently. I was following you and asking lots of questions about it. I think it was Explorer, that's right, you're on Explorer. So hopefully I'm looking forward to seeing where you netted out on Explorer, because that's where I'm going in April. So John, we are Viking cruisers, thought we would try Oceania. I hear that they've discontinued complimentary wine during meals. What are the common prices for their wine now? So I don't know the prices for wine, but you're right, Oceania have currently, they've gone through this process where they keep changing their inclusions and their exclusions. So I can't remember the exact ins and outs, but certainly I don't know the prices for wine overall. But you're right, you could get the O-Life and then they move to something else and something else. So I don't know the answer, but if anyone has better information, because I know there's a few people here that are big Oceania fans and big wine drinkers, so that's good. Oh, so Tom's saying the Facebook started late. I wonder why they did that. Journey with Josh, I can't answer this, but if Mark is still on, he might be able to answer this. So I have been to Santiago quite a few times, actually. I went two of the times I went to Antarctica, and then I went once actually before I joined Holland America Oosterdam, and I actually didn't go out. I was terrible in Santiago. I haven't sightseen in Santiago. Partly I was going there. I had some work stuff to catch up. So I actually just ate in the hotel, which is a terrible mission. So I haven't explored Santiago. But I know quite a few people on here probably have. And I think Mark and Annette, when they were in Santiago, did go out. So if anyone has really good suggestions, please, please, please leave some comments on that as well. So Denise has Region Explorer on hold. Yeah, I would be, just a point about that is, I would be cautious. I would just be a little bit cautious with Cruise Critic. I know that's a very important resource, and it's a good way of budgeting, of sussing things out. I do find Cruise Critic has become a little bit ranty, to be honest. So I think people are it's not as balanced as it used to be. So people, I feel like, are going to Cruise Critic when they're unhappy, so you lose some of the balance. I think in the olden days, I felt it used to be a little bit more balanced. So one of the things that you might also want to do, Denise, is follow some of the Regent Facebook groups, because often you will get quite a good discussion around what people think are working and not working. You'll often, in the comments there, you'll get some quite good balance. So I'm following more sort of Facebook groups to see some of the more balanced arguments. I really like to explore. I mean, it is not one of their newer ships for sure, but the itineraries I explore that they use in Explorer are fantastic. So that's really good. Lots of people got lots of love for Compass Rose, which is great. Let's have a look. Jeff, If ports are cancelled due to weather and you're stuck on board for multiple days, which cruise lines are able to step up their game and have plenty of extra things available to do on board? Jeff, in reality, all cruise lines will put on a new program if they, if you have sea days instead of port days. So I'm not sure if there's anyone that, I mean, in reality, any line that has a good program will have lots of extra things to do. So for example, if you're on a smaller ship, a Regent or a Windstar or something like that, which doesn't have a big entertainment team and doesn't have a big program, in reality, if you have a sea day, they're only going to be able to put on fairly more limited things. So they might throw in a couple of extra trivia or have get the speaker to do an extra speech or pull some of the speeches forward. If you go on a bigger line, so if you're on a Cunard or a Princess or something where they have a bigger entertainment team, or if even up a notch to Royal Caribbean where they have a big entertainment team, they're able to just tap in and run so many more things. So so it's really linked to the program, but every cruise line will put on a new program if it gets cancelled. So a lot of it will hinge around just how active, how active it would, it would be anyway, if you like. Steve asking the question, hi there, good to see you again, Steve. We're doing a transatlantic in October from Southampton, so I'm not sure if that's a premature or that's a repositioning. We have a day there before departure. Is there enough to do there? Was it worth taking the train to Salisbury for a few hours? Other suggestions? So I always get told off with Southampton because there's a lot of people on, and I'm sure people will comment here, who have a lot of love for Southampton. Now, there are a couple of interesting things in Southampton. So you do have a maritime museum. So if you've only got like, a day, you might not have a lot of time, so that might be enough to do. But certainly if you're going to Salisbury, is a very beautiful place. So certainly what's interesting, if you look at when cruise lines call in, I always look at what cruise lines are offering as options. If you look at cruise lines that are only stopping at Southampton, not doing an embarkation, disembarkation, they will often lay on a Salisbury and they will lay on a Stonehenge. So it's depending on the kind of adventure. I mean, Salisbury is really attractive, but you can certainly potter around Southampton. And I'm sure other people will have much better suggestions. I haven't spent a lot of time in Southampton, to be honest, because I will often go down on the train on the day or drive down on the day. It's an hour and a half either way, driving or train. So, for example, when I join Paul and Carol's group cruise, I'm just going down that morning. So I haven't spent a lot of time in Southampton. So people maybe have better suggestions. Barry, I'm an amateur photographer and would appreciate you mentioning when a more powerful lens will be needed, as you did on your Antarctic cruise. So Barry, I have got a DSLR, and I've got a big lens, a 400 lens. I used to have a 300 and then I upgraded to 400, and I barely use that in reality on many cruises. So you're right, I used it actually much more when I've gone on more wildlife stuff. So I've used it, for example, when I went to the Arctic, when I went both to Svalbard and when I went on Hapag-Lloyd when I did the Canadian Arctic and Greenland, because there's very strict rules around how far you can stay away from. You have to stay away from polar bears. So if you see them on land, they are very far away. And even if you're then on ice, and you have to stay quite far away. And now the rules are if the polar bear moves towards the ship has to withdraw. So that so I've used that a lot. I've used it a lot when I went on safari. So that was a real plus. So whether when I went on an actual land-based safari, but also when I went when I went on my South Africa trip beginning of last year, and we had some excursions which took us to some game reserves. Then I used it because you had animals really far away, elephants and giraffe and that kind of stuff. I actually didn't use it very much in Antarctica at all, because I used it more for whales, although whales came quite close to the ship, but on past ones I've used it. Now, what I have used though, with great success, which is what probably makes sense, is if you look at my Antarctic videos, you will see some quite nice, if I say so myself, close-ups of penguins and seals and some birds. Now, I actually didn't use a massive zoom lens for that. I used my Sony RX100 Mark VII, and I think that has up to, I can't remember, maybe it's 150, 200, but there on it, I would use that to get the closer, because you have to stay a certain distance away, not huge distance, But I found if you were just taking with a normal camera, or a lot of people would take it with their iPhone, I could get right in close. So I could be right up close. I've got these great shots of like the face of sea lions, or penguins right up close, or take shots when you've got these massive colonies. So then, but that wasn't a massive big lens. But certainly I would say people who went with just a standard camera, or most people had their phone, they got fine enough photographs. But a lot of people go, oh my God, what you got was amazing. And it wasn't a massive big thing. So I would say that. But it's really when I've done expedition stuff is the only time that I've really used it. So expedition to the Arctic, or kind of expedition with a lot of wildlife. So years ago when I did a Canadian one, we went to see bears, for example, that was really useful to use. So I actually don't take that lens with me on any other cruise other than if I know I've got wildlife. But I do have that Sony RX one, which is really, really good. So whatever, if you've got a DSLR, the equivalent of that, I'll check the actual zoom on that, and I'll put that in the notes perhaps afterwards. Dave asking the question, the issue is you won't. So Dave is asking a question around, Norwegian have the solar studios, and then they have a solar lounge, and it's a controlled area. But actually, as he pointed out, you can actually often get a better, inverted commas, cabin. So you can get a balcony, because the solar lounges are all inside, so solar cabins are all inside, and they're quite small, but you can actually get a balcony cabin sometimes for a lower price. But you won't get access to solar. The only people who get access to solar. So he's asked me, how do I convince them to give access? You won't, basically. They're very clear around that is something, because also they want to stop people. That one of the cells of the solar cabins that is that if you're in this contained unit, a bit like if you go into the Haven. So only people who can use that are people within that. So I mean, you could certainly ask the front desk or something, but I think you will absolutely struggle. Thanks, Amy, for that. I knew it was, I was going to say Solpadeine, and then I realized Solpadeine is a headache thing. So scopolamine. This is when we're talking about the seasickness bits and pieces. A lot of people also love there from, so there's Marcus, Four Seasons Hotel in Fort Lauderdale, very nice, which is very nice. And as I said, have a fantastic cruise. Oh, here we go. Nicole, I think this is your cliffhanger question now answered. Finished, shall I say. My husband and I are going to Antarctica next month, which is fabulous, very exciting. We're considering an Arctic expedition in the future. I wonder if you have any experience with the expedition cruise to that region. So I've sort of answered that. So yes, I have been to the region, and I would strongly encourage you to look at two different options. And there are more options, but the two that I've done, I'll tell you why I think they're good. So obviously, one of the iconic ones is to do Svalbard, which is, sort of north of Norway. That's one of the most famous ones. That's the first one that I did. And it is amazing. Now, I've noticed that there seems to be fewer companies. It's a bit harder to find those. They have restricted the size of ships that can go, but very much the same as they've done in the Antarctica, but only ships of 200 passengers or fewer can go there now. So it's cut out some of the lines that used to go there before, I guess, like Hurtigruten and stuff like that, probably. So so you straight away looking at more expensive things, but I guess you're going on Silversea, so that's probably, you understand the budget of that. But Svalbard is really fascinating. It's got very interesting history, good wildlife. We just see quite a few polar bears. But the thing which I thought was absolutely incredible, was I did that, as I mentioned, I did it on Hapag-Lloyd, but I know others do it. So for example, I know Mark here and stuff, they did it, if I remember correct, on Seabourn as well. I think Silversea does it. I'm not sure if Silversea does it, but Seabourn does it on their very beautiful ships. Is a combination Greenland and the Canadian Arctic. Now I did on Hapag-Lloyd, which is a German-speaking line, but I went on Inspiration, which is the international line. So they do cater in language for English speakers. But it was a 3-week tour, and it was quite tiring, I guess. Because like 85% or more of the ship was German. But anyway, but that was absolutely fascinating because, Greenland is amazing. You get to see these incredibly interesting communities there. There's lots of history there. Particularly go across the Canadian Arctic is very interesting. So I absolutely love that. We saw polar bears as well. So I would look at those two as the option. I mean, the most classic one is probably the Arctic. There's probably more options in reality to do the sort of the Svalbard one, but it was really fantastic. I would definitely like to do that again. So some of the tips there on Buenos Aires, people actually just using English-speaking taxi drivers. So it's interesting, actually. You're right. Coming out of when I went there on Holland America, there was a big taxi rank, which was offering tours as well. I haven't tried that, and also within the cruise terminal there were some, but the people asking the question, I guess, were not were doing Buenos Aires before they joined a cruise. I don't know the answer to this, but I noticed this as well. Mindshift appears to be focusing a bit more on English-speaking markets. Robbie Williams is singing at the inauguration of their new ship, Relax. I don't know, but I can tell you what the other German lines do. So, and bearing in mind that they're owned by the same company, this is what I think is likely to happen. So, Mindshift is partly owned by Royal Caribbean and TUI, who also own Hapag-Lloyd as well, and so it's kind of it's a joint venture. So basically, what they do is what Hapag-Lloyd does is with their classic fleet, they nominate one ship, which is Europa 2, as their international ship. And what they do with Hapag-Lloyd, as I mentioned earlier, if you were there, they have Inspiration as their international ship. So basically, what it means is all of the crew are bilingual, and they will do all announcements dual language. So all the announcement ships are dual language. They then have, if there are for Mindshift it will be less applicable, but on Inspiration they then had separate, talks when we had our talks by the expedition team. They ran talks in English for English speakers. They ran talks in German. So what I think they will do is probably let's like to do that, but they will basically make sure that everything's done as dual language. Any crew member you speak to will be able to speak in two languages. That's what I'm assuming they'll do, because that's the model that sort of worked for them. Of course, it gets very hit and miss on how many English speakers there aren't or aren't. But I'm very interested in Mindshift. I would like to try Mindshift because the ships look very nice. So I'm keeping an eye on that as well. And if I do hear anything more, I will let you know. But that's my assumption, because that's the model that sort of worked. Unlike, say, when I've been on Costa before, where they had just when it was very few English speakers, maybe 20 of us on a massive Costa ship, they just had an English hostess who would hold certain briefings for us and explain certain things to us. Like they would do the separate, safety drill. They would brief us on disembarkation and stuff like that. They would do that kind of separately. And then what MSC do is they have entertainment, because they're multilingual, which works in all languages. So it's more singing and dancing kind of stuff. Claudia's asking a question, which is any must-do recommendations for Tortola, St. Lucia, Antigua, the best way to get to the beach at the end of the runway in Philip St. Martin. You'll find it very easy to get to the runway. There'll be loads of taxis there that will do the run. You can there's sometimes a lot of the excursions will include a stop there as well, but it's pretty easy to get there as a taxi, and it is a taxi right away. It's not nearby. I have never been to Tortola, so I don't have any suggestions there. St. Lucia, there's a couple of things that are worth doing in St. Lucia, one of which I like doing, but we don't do very often if I'm with Mark because he's less keen, is there's a very nice catamaran ride that you can take out to the Pitons, the two pointy mountains. That's quite a nice day out if you like kind of the catamaran stuff. There also is Hotel Chocolat, which is the big, what's a UK chocolate company, I guess, but they've expanded. They've recently sold to actually Mars, but they have a chocolate factory, a chocolate plantation and stuff. And they actually have a very interesting tour where you can go there where they explain how they grow the stuff and make chocolate and all that kind of stuff. And then there's also just some very nice beaches there. And I can't remember the name of the beaches, but some very nice beaches. There's a very big market near to the port, which is sort of within walking distance as well, which is quite good. Antigua, I have only done a beach run in Antigua and sort of done a bit of self-exploring around the port. So if anyone has better suggestions on Antigua, my problem is in the Caribbean, as I often say, is I go to the beach when I go to the Caribbean, so I'm not really ideal. Yanni, I enjoy cruising but get seasick. Which cruise destinations are more likely to make me sick, or maybe I should focus on less likely to make you sick? So obviously one of the options, if you are worried about that, is river cruising, because river cruising, I I would always say it's impossible. I mean, you should never say impossible, I guess, but it would be extremely difficult to get seasick on a river cruise. So that's always an option. All those different river cruises are an option. I would tend to avoid transatlantic crossings, particularly winter transatlantic crossings. But the problem is every destination could be rough. So, if you talk to ship captains, they will often tell you some of the roughest seas that they've encountered in their normal cruising is actually in the Mediterranean. The parts of the Caribbean can be very choppy at times. So it's a lot of it hinges. But obviously, if you're normally going kind of mid-season, peak season, the reason it's peak season is normally because the weather's the nicest and it's kind of the calmest. But if you want to avoid the Atlantic, you want to avoid doing direct passage, you want to avoid the Tasman Sea, those places that are renowned for being quite choppy. If you go to like the Inside Passage in Alaska, that's pretty calm. You can have a little bit of choppy water. Somebody's getting there, but those are the ones that you should avoid. I think those are the key ones to avoid. So you asked me which ones to avoid. Francis is asking, going on a land tour of England, Wales, and Scotland. Only have 2 days in London. Which are the best museums? So Francis, a lot of this depends on your overall interests, but things that I would strongly recommend, I will tell you, is one of the most fascinating places to go is to Churchill war cabinet rooms, which are underground, where he sort of ran the war from. They're really, really interesting. It's very well done. It's just off sort of Downing Street. They're fantastic. The Imperial War Museum is also an amazing museum. The Maritime Museum in Greenwich is extremely good. So those are the sort of the more serious ones, if you like. I mean, obviously the British Museum is just phenomenal, and the Victoria and Albert is just phenomenal. If you're looking for something a little bit more contemporary, the Design Museum in Kensington is also really good. And obviously you have Tate Britain, you have the National Portrait Gallery and stuff. But those are sort of the ones. British Museum is just phenomenal, and certainly the Churchill's War Museum and the Imperial War Museum and the Maritime Museum in Greenwich is fantastic. And the nice thing about if you go to the one in Greenwich, depending where you're staying, is you can also get the river taxi down, so you also get quite a nice scenic view. Which actually an Uber, it's called an Uber river taxi. It's not that expensive. Goes really regularly, so you can also get some nice sights and sounds of London heading down there. So let's have a look. Rebecca is asked, Outlander, thank you. That was the thing here. That was Outlander. But when I went on the cruise, I hadn't watched actually Outlander very much. And people kept referring to it. I actually came back and got really into Outlander. It was fantastic in seeing all the places and the various sites. Oh, I pronounced it correctly. Yes. I know that was always the problem because it's spelled such a strange way. And I in my mind, I was kind of like doing that. Some other good tips there on Adelaide. Hopefully you're seeing that there. Rebecca, due to a recent injury, I'll need to use a mobility scooter to get around. Do you know about use on cruise ships? I have a cruise on Disney planned early March and don't want to. And I'm guessing it's Canada, but I'll answer your question because this is very, very, very important issue because some cruise lines are changing their rules around this whole area. It's absolutely critical, Rebecca, that you talk to the cruise line if you are bringing or need to use a mobility scooter or you need to use a wheelchair, because the cruise lines, to meet SOLAS, safety at sea regulations, what cruise lines are doing is they're becoming much stricter around the number of wheelchairs and mobility scooters they allow on board. And the reason for that is they have to allocate a crew member for anybody that has mobility issues and may need assistance if there is an emergency, because obviously your muster station may be on a completely different deck to you are, so they can only have so many crew allocated. So what some of them have started to do is to say, you have to let us know. We may refuse you embarking if you arrive with a wheelchair and you haven't let us know. Now, for some lines in the UK, they're also requiring people to book an accessible cabin. And the reason for that is they only have those amount of crew. They only have the amount of crew that for the same amount of accessibility cabins, if you like. Now, that's not true of all cruise lines, but it's very important because all cruise lines actually have a rule that you can't leave scooters and wheelchairs in the hallway. That's again for safety reasons. It has to be able to fit into your cabin. So you need a cabin that can fit the mobility scooter, and also it can get through the door. Now, there are different companies that partner with the cruise lines. Some called the company, for example, called Special Needs at Sea, but you can kind of Google that and just search whatever your favorite search is, like people who rent mobility scooters for certain cruise lines. You can probably put mobility scooter rental Disney or something like that, because a lot of them have requirements around the size of the scooter and stuff like that. So you need to double check that. But absolutely make sure that you check that you can bring a scooter on board, or you can use a scooter on board. And if there are any restrictions they have, like a certain size cabin or whatever. But the cruise lines are becoming much stricter on this. I covered this in a recent video around things that are being banned and stuff, because quite a lot of people contacted me where they had been told they could not go on their cruise without booking a different cabin. And they were very frustrated because they only used wheelchairs infrequently, not all the time, and they felt it was kind of not the right thing to do because they were having to buy more expensive cabins. But absolutely, just be very, have the discussion with Disney or through your travel agent with Disney. It's very, very, very important, because you don't, as you say, you don't want to arrive and find that there's an issue and they're going to turn you away or something like that. Kathy, I would love to go on an Nile River cruise. Are they any less expensive that you would recommend? They're so pricey. So they can be very pricey. Now, Kathy, there are a couple like this Gate One, for example. I know do a big Nile River cruise. There are a lot of companies, and I don't know the names of them offhand because I know there's quite a lot of local and small companies and brands I hadn't heard. But obviously, you've got cost ones like Uniworld, Viking, Amma Waterways. But if you look at things like Gate One and some of those lines, now if anyone has a better suggestion than that, please, pop that in there. If you talk to, I don't know where you're based, Kathy, but there are some travel agents like Titan and Trailfinders and stuff. They probably also have lines they work with. Bucko was asking the question if there's a good region Facebook. So those who don't know, there isn't a very advanced, developed, sophisticated, whatever the right word is, Facebook group called Silversea Passengers, and I can't remember the name of the guy who runs it, but this has PDFs with downloads, answers all sorts of questions. It's an incredible resource. There isn't an equivalent to region. The region ones, certainly the ones I've come across, if anyone has a better one, are more passenger kind of fan ones, where the Silversea Passenger one is incredible because they have created a massive, massive resource. So I've only come across the more chitty chat ones, if that's the ones. Now, Crystal is interesting. I've recently joined the Crystal one, and they don't have the same amount of resource, but Crystal actively are answering questions in there. So it's sort of an official one, and I'm finding that quite helpful because people are having passengers are having a discussion, and then Crystal are coming in as well and clarifying, which is quite good actually for the cruise lines. If there's anything, people are giving misinformation, I quite like they're coming in and saying, well, that's not quite right, kind of thing. Rosemary, good to see you here. Rosemary's got some fantastic suggestions there. Thanks very much for that, Rosemary, for the people who asked about Santiago, embarrassing me about how I don't really know that. Here we are. Journey for Josh has a video on his site on things to do in Southampton. So fantastic for that. So Journey with Josh. So the person who's asking about Southampton. Frankie got a great suggestion. I didn't think of this one actually. I should have. Is the Red Funnel Ferry to Isle of Wight is fantastic. Isle of Wight, you've got Osborne House, which is brilliant, which is where Queen Victoria spent a lot of her time after the death of Albert and actually died there. And it's a really fascinating, very, really fascinating. Oh dear, someone, thank you for your channel. I'll just cancel my Japan cruise. So sometimes I do get messages from people which I think is a good thing, where people have watched my stuff and cancel because they've decided it's not for them. So I guess it's about helping people find the right thing, but also when something else is different. So hopefully that works out very well for you. And Paul and Carol also making the point that Paul and Carol, they do have a lot of stuff on Southampton as well. So it's Paul and Carol Love to Travel. Walter's here, which is great. So Walter is one of the travel agents that I recommend in the US. So where's Walter Travel? So the interchangeable lenses. That's a good point, actually, the lens rental, because we had this discussion before that Mark, who was on here earlier, I was mentioning, were talking about before we were going to Antarctica, buying versus renting. And there's, in the UK and the US, there's some quite good ones, because this lens can cost like $1,000 or more, and if you're only going to use them once or twice, it's a lot of money to spend unless you can rent them. So yes, so Walter's a big fan of Regent Explorer, so I'm really keen on looking Explorer. I'm really keen to go on Explorer because some people have been on and said they don't consider it to be a real competitor for Regent and Silversea. They do see it as a competitor for Oceania and Viking kind of thing. So I'm really intrigued to see where I think it lands. I know Walter was a huge big fan of those. Let's have a look. Reminder, write the word question so I don't miss it. Here's one I haven't missed. I have missed, but sorry, I haven't missed. Didn't write question, but I haven't missed. That makes sense. Yes. I know you wouldn't do a Royal Caribbean World Cruises. You're not a huge on Royal Caribbean, but if a luxury line such as Silversea did a World Cruise, would you do it? If not, why not? So it's interesting. A couple of you have asked about a World Cruise. I always used to say that I wanted to do a World Cruise. I've done half a World Cruise before on Cunard. So we did literally half of it. We did the Southampton to Sydney part, and then we didn't do the second leg because we were then getting off and doing a cruise around Japan and stuff like that. So I always wanted to do the World Cruise, literally get on one place and get off, 180 days later. So I've actually moved away from doing a World Cruise to doing a World Cruise, but jumping between different lines. So a couple of people have done it, like Bob and Holly, who sometimes on here. They did a similar thing last year, and we had a discussion recently for my captain's Zoom call for my captain patrons and stuff. Is one of the disadvantages of a World Cruise in some ways is, depending on what you do. So if you go all the way around the world, either you have to go for a very long time, so you go for 5 months, and it's quite port intensive, or if you go on like the Cunard one we did, it was kind of January. It was kind of a couple of months, maybe 3 months, but there was a lot of sea days because they needed a lot of ground to cover. I think if I was going to do a World Cruise again, I'd want to do something much more port intensive, but also I'd want to stop in some places and linger longer. So what I would like to do, and Mark and I have spoken about doing this, is actually planning a sort of a World Cruise, but actually picking various segments. So you might actually say, I'm actually going to do the Africa part on Regent or whatever, because they have, or Silversea or Viking or whatever, because they have the best itinerary that's going to go to the places I want. But I might get off in, I don't know, Cape Town, because I want to explore Cape Town and do some safaris or whatever. But then I'm going to get on something which then takes me across from Cape Town to Asia, and that might be on the Cunard ships. I'm going to do that because it's got a good itinerary. So actually kind of do it in segments based on the itinerary that's really going to do the biggest dive, if you like. We had a great time on the World Cruise. I would definitely have been happy to stay on. So there's, as you know, a lot of people do World Cruises. Now, the Royal Caribbean World Cruise was enormous. It was half a year. I don't think I'd want to be on one line on one ship for half a year. I would consider doing, and this is the balance that we've got, is if you're going to be on a ship for a couple of months, you want a ship that's going to also have a lot to do. So we originally chose Cunard because it was sort of a ship of Victoria's, like maybe 2,000 passengers, but it meant that it had a big enough casino, it had big theatre, it had lots kind of stuff going on. If you went on, say, a Silversea or even some of the Oceania, they're moving to Vista now. But at Insignia, it's quite a small ship, and there's not necessarily a lot to do. So I'd be worried about, would you want just more going on? But certainly, I would like to go around the world, but I don't know if I do it on one ship in one go. Rank asking the question: what's your opinion of the 7-day Cunard trip to Norwegian Fjords? I've actually done that before. I did it on Queen Elizabeth. It was great. I mean, you don't have a lot of time in the fjords. But because you have 1 sea day getting there, 1 sea day getting back, so you only have a few days in the middle. But it was great. It was the first time I've been to the fjords on a cruise, so it was a really good kind of taster. The key thing I would say is, if you are looking, I haven't seen the most recent itineraries. I know they do it on Queen Mary 2, and they do some of the smaller ships. I think like Queen Anne does it. Is just make sure that you're going enough into the fjords, because there are more restrictions on where the bigger ships can go. So just make sure that you're not just going to Bergensvanger. Whatever you want to make sure you get into some of the small ports, but it is pretty good. So Boca Boy said, thanks. They were just making the point that I was saying, that I'm seeing really mixed views. So I'm really excited to go about who this is really targeting. I suspect I may come away thinking along the lines of Boca Boys, and we had messaged each other a little bit on Instagram on this. I suspect I might come out and it's the Viking Oceania kind of camp, if you like. So I'm really excited about really excited about that. Right, let's have a look. Top down driver leaving tomorrow on Viking Ocean to Australia and New Zealand. Fabulous. Any advice to maximize the experience? I would say look very careful. Well, if you live tomorrow, you've hopefully got all your excursions sorted out. But do have a look very carefully at the excursions and make sure that you genuinely seeing the best things. And I don't know the specific excursions, but I do find that often the included excursions on Viking don't necessarily always get you to the must-see sites. Now, I don't know that itinerary there. So I often find when I go on Viking, I'm doing some of their extra tours or some self-exploring. So I would really just make sure that you're seeing the absolute must-see things in all of those ports. Now, I have looked at some of the Viking itineraries because there's a Viking itinerary actually which goes from New Zealand through Australia and ends up in Bali that I would really like to do in 27 after my Antarctica trip. So I've been looking at some of their stuff. But that would be my main thing, is just make sure that you're seeing the absolute must-see things. There are some pretty good stops, which like in Auckland and stuff, which have fantastic hop on off of buses. So you can also supplement that with what they're doing as well. Rosie adding about the Canadian Arctic Greenland future with Quark and Ultramarine, which is their new ship and also loved as well. So good to know that someone else loved that. Jerry, I haven't heard anything around that. But I know there was some discussion where the residents of Sitka were pushing back, but I haven't seen any follow-up on that. So I will keep an eye out for that. But I know there was a lot of kind of discussion around that. So, but I haven't seen any updates, and I do follow lots of kind of the cruise news and stuff. So I haven't seen anything. But maybe as we're heading more into the season, we might start hearing more than that. I have been to Alaska in May, and it was fantastic. Do people go to spas? A lot of the ships that I've been on, though, is where they have the, so I've been on, when I went in May, also when I went in Princess and stuff, they have either the stuff over closes, what's called the dome. It's got a name. Anyway, with the ship, they can close the roof over the, over the pool. So the pools were very, very busy. And a few people, diehard people, who are out, sailing around in the spa. So I'm going to take a slug. I've got a frog in my throat. So, so generally it was quite busy. I mean, the downside was when I was on Princess, which is actually the beginning of June, but end of May, is the adult pool is the one that was closed over, and it was just manically busy with kids. So it was absolutely heaving. Absolutely overheaving. So lots of discussion on Explorer, I can see. So I'm absolutely making me even more really wanting to go. Let's have a look at Pam K. I think we've got time for that. Not coming up. What happens if you book a cruise for 2 but only 1 person shows up? Some lines show no cabins available for solo travelers, and they show plenty for 2 passengers. So I mean, you won't get any money back. It's unlikely at that late stage. So if you are, so it's unlikely to save you money. So it's unusual. I haven't seen that a lot. I know what you're saying. I did look at one cruise line once when I put in for 2 people, it was showing me a wider range of cabins. So it was showing like everything from suites and stuff. I went up in 1 passenger, it was showing more lower grades. And I don't know whether that's because their viewers, people didn't want to pay. They didn't want to pay for 2 or what. But certainly, you could book for 2 and go with 1 because the price difference is very different. It's almost non-existent. So, for example, I booked a transatlantic as a solo. Then Mark was coming with me. I'd added to him. The fare increase was 0, literally nothing. So if I'd booked it for 2 and only I'd gone, it still would be 0. I did take him off a cruise recently. I can't remember which one it was now. Oh, yes, it was on Sun Princess in June. You can't come on that anymore. And so I booked as 2, but before I paid final balance, which I haven't paid yet actually, because it's due next month, is I asked travel agent Sarah to take Mark off. The fare went down like maybe £100 or something, which was some I guess port fees or something like that. I would booked a trip on Holland America, a long trip, a month-long trip, added Mark onto that from solo to 2, and that went up quite a lot because I got a promotion where Have It All was included. So the only difference was he had to then pay for Have It All because the promotion ended. So basically, you're not going to save any money, I guess. So you could, you're not going to save any money from that. I don't know if that's the question you're asking, but I guess you're trying to say, does it unlock more cabins and you book it? But they won't do anything as such, as far as I'm aware. Now, if Walter knows anything different, then let me know. The key thing, of course, would be the person who the booking's name is in to do it. But I would certainly let the cruise line know beforehand, which is what we've done, just so you don't have any kind of issues, whatever they may be. So we have churned through time, and I need to wrap up. We've gone slightly over time. There's a couple more questions there, and I will have a look and see if I have if I've missed any, try and answer them. As I mentioned, there will not be a live stream next week, unfortunately, but there will be a live stream after that, which will be probably just about the week before I head off to for my Japan trip. So I will try and do at least 2 before I head off on Japan. So thanks for joining me. Hope you have a fabulous rest of the weekend. Take care and see you soon.